All right, so we're going to get started here in a short bit. First off, happy Sunday or good morning to the folks on the East Coast. Good afternoon to folks in Europe. Good evening to those joining us from Asia. All right, so just getting my final bit of setup here. Just pause with me 1 second. All right. Doing some setups here. Sorry. All right. So, hello everyone. It's the Gossip Guy, your source for news and developments from the world powered by Hashgraph and the Hedera ecosystem. And I'm back at it again with a live stream this week. Partially because, given the past 2 months, there's been a lot that's been going on within the whole world powered by Hashgraph. So I thought it would be great to take the opportunity to just update everyone with some of the things that have taken place, and also share some of my own personal, reactions to this. So, with that said, we're doing a live stream, and also just as a kind of disclaimer here before we kind of get started, as many folks know, I'm the Gossip Guy, and also being the Gossip Guy, I am not an employee of Hedera Hashgraph, nor am I being paid to make these videos. I'm just an active community member like yourself. So all of the comments that I make about this are my personal opinions, and it does not reflect those of Hedera Hashgraph. Also, I decided to do a live stream instead of doing those kind of like weekly videos that I had done last year, mainly because live streams are much easier for me to kind of produce, as opposed to those weekly videos that would take a couple days to put together. And also I figured live stream's good to, partially because it can be interactive while also delivering you some important information. Before we actually get started here too, just one small thing and maybe a request from the folks that are joining us. So I've been making these videos for the past year, also trying to join the YouTube Partners Program. That's basically where you can also receive ad revenue for the videos. I'm actually just only a few hours away from being able to reach that hurdle. It's solely based on the total watch time that your viewers have of your channel. So just as a small request for anyone that's joining us, if you're gonna, let's say you don't have the time to sit through the entire live stream, if you don't mind just leaving the window running in the background, that really helps with boosting up the watch time. So I greatly appreciate it. And so enough of this intro and talking. Let's dive into the live stream. And before we get started, we'll go into the agenda. So really have 5 things I wanted to cover today. First one is the obvious. Let's wanted to recap the recent council member announcement. So you all are aware, Hedera announced 5 of their initial Hedera Hashgraph council members. So I wanted to kind of go through that. The second section here is I wanted to provide some updates as relates to the Helix Accelerator program. That's basically the inaugural Hashgraph focused accelerator that's taking place right now in Hong Kong. The third item, and this is more of a recap from last month of Mainnet and testing program. Basically just wanted to take a look at some of the developments there. The fourth item is we want to go over some of the recent management updates coming from Hedera Hashgraph, as there was 2 kind of notable changes at the senior management level. And finally, want to wrap things up with calling out some cool projects that I've come across over the past couple weeks. And also, part of the reason I wanted to call them out is, they're very focused to the Hashgraph ecosystem. So I wanted to just give them a spotlight there, and that represents a website called hash-hash.info and hbarscan.com. So we'll go over those little more details later on in the stream. All right, so as many of you are aware, this past week, Hedera Hashgraph announced their first 5, initial council members of their total 39 Hedera Hashgraph council, which is supposed to represent, leading organizations that will be responsible for helping to guide the overall guidance of the Hedera Hashgraph platform. And there's a whole list of responsibilities that they'll cover. So with that being said, let's just take a quick look at some of the stuff from Hedera Hashgraph. And I just want to say real quick, if you haven't had a chance to check out Hedera's new website, I must say that it's pretty impressive. I kind of like the design that they put together. As many recall, they had the Hello Future kind of picture up at the front. But I just like this new design and layout, partially because it just has this higher degree of professionalism with it. So that aside, we'll dive into the council member section here. And yeah, so basically, as we're all aware, the members that were announced represented Deutsche Telekom, DLA Piper, Magazine Luiza, Nomura, and Swisscom Blockchain. On top of Swirls, as everyone knows, was the staple member of the council. So yeah, but as far as the responsibilities that the council will have, Hedera has it just kind of laid out here, but they'll be responsible for directing the code base, setting up the initial nodes on the network, preventing against forking, and then ultimately subjected to term limits to make sure that no one member or entity has control over the decision making of the council. So clearly you can check out the Hedera's website to get more information about what the council members are going to be responsible for. There's a lot of content out there, from either Matt Harmon, the CEO, or Tom Trowbridge, president of Hedera Hashgraph, that talks about what those responsibilities will be. But I figured we'd take some time to just also take a closer look at some of these members, because I know some of the reactions that I've heard from the community was, who exactly are these folks? And I've never heard of them. I would think that Hedera would announce, some larger entities as part of their first batch. And as many folks out there know, I had put out a video earlier this week that went through who those members were and just did a little bit of a background. But I would like to say the contrary to what some of the folks in the community were saying about this. But these are actually some of the largest corporations in the world. If you haven't heard about them, it's probably because a lot of them are based outside of the U.S. For example, you have two, telecommunication giants based in Europe. So I'm sure many of the European viewers out there, or European community members, are well aware of who they are. But I just thought I'd take some quick time to just recap who these guys are and why, as a whole, we should kind of get excited about these entities joining the Hedera Hashgraph Council. So I guess the first one, take a look at. So this is just real quick, the announcement announcing those members. So the first company I wanted to take a look at is Deutsche Telekom. And if you don't know, Deutsche Telekom is actually one of the largest telecommunication companies in the world. I believe it's within the top 5, but it's definitely one of the largest telecommunications company in Europe, or excuse me, one of the largest telecommunication companies in Europe. There's obviously, Vodafone, and then also Telefonica in Spain, but Deutsche Telekom nevertheless is pretty huge. And also for the folks in the U.S., you might ask yourself, you don't know Deutsche Telekom. That's partially because in the U.S. it goes by the brand name of T-Mobile. So obviously another large mobile cellular provider in the U.S. So Deutsche Telekom, obviously telecommunications, it's really key to have members on the council that come from that space. I mean, these are essentially your internet service providers. They have just a depth of knowledge, especially right now. A lot of telecommunication companies are getting into Internet of Things. A lot of those companies also have extensive businesses providing cloud solutions. So it makes sense that they would be interested in blockchain or distributed ledger technologies, and it also makes sense that that they provide a depth of knowledge that can be shared with the Hedera Hashgraph Governance Council. And I guess one thing we should probably also note too is that as part of Hedera's process of going through and identifying who these members are, they could clearly have gone after some of the largest some of the largest corporations in the world, like the Walmarts or Exxon Mobil's. But you always got to ask yourself is like what experience and knowledge do those companies might have in distributed ledger technologies that will sufficiently support them in being able to if they join Hedera as a part of a governance member, do they actually have like the skill set that will be able to support that role. In a lot of cases, some of these big corporations, either they might be doing stuff with distributed ledger technologies, or they might just be building their own and they don't want to necessarily play nicely with like others. So it's really important that Hedera brings in folks that obviously have that brand name recognition, but also have some experience in the space. So I think the biggest determining factor that I personally want to look at when we see some of these new council members announced is just what have they done so far in the DLT space? Are they complete newbies? Are they only focused on things for their own benefit, or have they been part of these consortiums? Do they have experience working with other enterprises to develop DLT solutions? Are they building stuff on their own with the intentions of making it available for their customers or making it available to like other entities? So that's the kind of key factor I think is will definitely stand out with like some of these council members. And yeah, with that being said, I think the first 5 that were announced have definitely met some of those criteria. So I'll just go back here to Deutsche Telekom. But one of the things that we should also point out too is that a lot of these entities, the folks that are going to be joining the council are not necessarily like the CEO of the company or the senior management of the company. Usually what's happening is that the council members or the people that are going to be active with Hedera Hashgraph are folks that are associated with like some sort of innovation or labs function of like the corporation. That's partially because DLTs, blockchain, it's a new technology. It's still in its early stages of development, where companies are not going to necessarily go building large scale solutions and products. They want to first experiment with it, see what's possible, figure out how they can ultimately bring it to commercialize it, bring it to market before they kind of build out like a full-fledged like business around it. So in a lot of cases, the council members that will be joining, it'll usually be through their kind of like innovations or labs groups. So I just wanted to point that out because in Deutsche Telekom's case, we understand based on the press release and also some of the other information that they shared during their live stream this past week is that the T-Labs group within Deutsche Telekom will be those that will be a part of the council and be involved with that. So, this is a pretty impressive group of, folks based in Europe that have done a lot of work in kind of like the whole, telecommunication space. Also have gotten some extensive experience in DLT, Internet of Things. So if you want to check them out, there's this, they have their own personal website where you can see some of the projects that they've been working on. They also have a Medium page where, they give their own personal reactions onto, recent developments within the kind of like, or recent technology trends. They give their own personal commentary. I thought it was pretty interesting back in November. They had some commentary about the EOS voting process. So, clearly these folks have had, experience within the blockchain space. And like I said, coming from a telecommunications company like Deutsche Telekom, it'll be really interesting to see what they, kind of bring as far as their expertise to being a council member. So the next member, and just going in alphabetical order here, is DLA Piper. So as many folks that joined the live stream know, this partner, Scott Thiel, was there, gave a presentation to talk about some of the use cases that DLA Piper is looking at. For those that don't know, DLA Piper is one of the largest law firms in the entire world. You probably don't know about it because they tend to kind of like, work behind the scenes as far as helping out their clients. But by no means, DLA Piper is not a small entity, is huge. And another thing that stands out about it, because they're so large, is actually they're, they've made a lot of, or they've made a name for themselves in the tech space, and they've also been known for actually developing their own client solutions, like their own kind of like products and services that incorporate some of that technology. So I thought it was really interesting to hear during the live stream how DLA was looking to use some of the distributed ledger technologies and smart contracts to kind of support some of their escrow services. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But another thing I'm kind of excited about to hear excited to hear that DLA Piper is going to be joining the council is this individual right here. So just give a second to load. Mark F. Radcliffe. And the reason you should get excited for this guy and his affiliations with DLA Piper, and also the fact that he was at the Hedera assembly event, was that Mark Radcliffe has an extensive experience in the kind of open source software community, and also has extensive experience in kind of this development of these consortiums that have emerged over the past couple years, focused on different, aspects of the internet. Just as taking a step back here, like the whole concept that Hedera is proposing with this like council, clearly this is not something that's new. We saw it obviously with Visa, that's what Hedera is kind of modeling itself after. But also too, there's been organizations like Icon, Apache Software Foundation, which all kind of have this concept of bringing together different entities from across different industries, to ultimately make governance decisions for their software. So with that kind of being said, what I find is really interesting about Mark is that he's got some pretty extensive background working in those open source communities, working on the Apache Software Foundation as part of the legal committee, OpenStack Foundation. Originally was involved with Icon back in the 1990s with development of a dispute resolution framework, and the list goes on. But also the other thing I think is really cool about Mark is that he's been quite active in the DLT space, obviously lending a lot of commentary and also perspectives over important emerging topics in the space. And you probably won't recognize his name, but his some of these publications have been posted all over CoinDesk and other kind of DLT focused media outlets. He's given some commentary about security tokens, and also talking about how open source software licenses apply to kind of the blockchain DLT space. And like I said, I know Mark was I guess at the Hedera annual assembly, because I was able to notice through some tweets that were associated with him that he looked to have taken some pictures from the audience there. And yeah, I mean, I also like this personal tweet right here is like, Hedera has given considerable thought to governance needs to blockchain platforms. The Governance Council is the answer. I'm eager to apply my knowledge from the OSS Foundation to blockchain. So like I said, Mark has got some very extensive experience there. I recommend you go check out his Twitter, follow up on him. But it's pretty exciting to see someone that's been very active in the space, affiliated with a company that's going to be a part of the council members. So that's just with DLA Piper. Next, Magazine Louisa, and this is probably the one that some folks might be scratching their head a bit, being like, I don't know who these guys are. Are they big enough to be a council member? And let me just say, Magazine Louisa, one of the largest retailers in Brazil. We have to think, Hedera wants to just have a distributed, council membership representing members coming from all different continents around the world. Brazil is obviously the largest economy in South America, Latin America, so it would make sense that you go after one of the largest companies in that arena, especially companies that have extensive experience with e-commerce and also, all things digital. So Luiza definitely meets those criteria. Like I said, one of the largest retailers in Latin America, but also what's really helped them, what's really stood out about them is that they completely went through a digital transformation a few years back, where they were traditionally brick and mortar, and then completely went all in on e-commerce and other type of digital solutions. And one of that that basically supported all of it was that they were highly involved with basically creating like an open API platform. And there's a lot of like publications out there that talks about how Luiza was able to use APIs to kind of transform their e-commerce platforms. And I think that's kind of noteworthy because in a lot of ways that whole kind of like API first development approach is really key in also supporting the use of distributed ledger technologies, because think all you folks out there that are using the Hedera SDK all know that you have to have extensive knowledge in working with APIs to be able to use it. So it's good to see an organization like Magazine Luiza as like kind of a leading organization that has extensive experience with that whole open API concept. And like I said before, just similar to Deutsche Telekom, it looks like the Luiza Labs team will be involved with the council. And like I said, take some time to look into Magazine Luiza, but let's just say they're not a tiny company. They're pretty big, and it's pretty exciting to see them join the governance council. Next up, we have Nomura. And I also got comments from folks to say, like, who the heck is Nomura? I've never heard of them. Well, Nomura is actually one of the largest financial institutions in the world, which just clarifies that they are more of an investment bank as opposed to like a traditional retail bank. So typically investment banks, they don't hold as much assets or liabilities as like a traditional bank in the form of deposits. So if you look at purely balance sheet wise, they're not going to be as large as like, let's say like a Bank of America per se, but they're very, like, I just put it this way, Nomura is like the leading investment bank in Asia. If you look at any of the league tables out there, they're one of the largest they're one of the largest underwriters of bonds throughout Asia. Obviously they have a huge presence in Japan, which is their their home market. But at the same time, too, they've also been doing a lot of stuff in the DLT space. Probably the most noteworthy item for them is that they partnered up with Ledger to basically come up with a custody solution for institutional customers. And that was pretty noteworthy because that was the first bank that ever, kind of like announced plans to do that. So that even came before Fidelity Digital Asset made their announcement. So it's really cool to see kind of like a company like Nomura joining Hedera, and also at the same time too coming from Japan, which if you're not aware already, Japan has just some very extensive experience and also a very kind of open place for DLTs. So it's great to see them joining. And lastly, we have Swisscom Blockchain, which just clarifies. So Swisscom obviously is the larger organization, but their Swisscom Blockchain subsidiary is the one that's actually going to be joining the council. And what I thought was pretty interesting is that Swisscom actually created this separate subsidiary that's just focused on, hey, how can we run businesses within the DLT space? So I was just pretty impressed with like the types of activities that they've been involved with so far. Coming from a telecommunications company. I mean, it doesn't surprise me that they're interested in the space, but it was really interesting to see the extent of the services that they're, that they're offering in the space. I don't know to what extent each of them are actually profitable and, the size of them, but think, just to know that they have quite a range of activities that they're involved with is pretty cool. And also, it's interesting to hear, the experience and knowledge that they've also had with other public networks, partially because a lot of these corporations, they have experience in the private, ledger space, but they haven't had as much experience with the public ledgers. Whereas in Swisscom Blockchain's case, they actually have extensive knowledge working in the public ledgers space. They're running nodes on Ethereum. They were running also nodes in IOTA. So these guys, come in with a lot of experience and knowledge, and it's great to see them join the council. All right, so that's just kind of kind of a look through of the council members, just adding in my own personal reactions. Obviously, it's going to be kind of cool to hear in the next coming months of who else will be joining the council. I'll let you in on a little bit of gossip. I'm not going to name any names, but I might have stumbled upon a couple of organizations that might be joining Hedera as part of the governance council. And let me just say that they're pretty impressive names. So be on the lookout for that. I know that's really kind of vague, but like I said, I mean, there's obviously aiming for some very large institutions that are coming in with a depth of knowledge to support their, and expertise to support the council. So, have faith that that's going to be carried out. Same time too, I know some other folks out there have been asking, hey, where's Hedera stands? I mean, where does Hedera stand right now with like all of their, the overall 39? And one thing I'll just also point out too is that I think in a lot of cases, it's not so much that Hedera is having a hard time finding members. I think it's just more of helping to get those members across the kind of field goal line and actually getting them to officially sign up and basically sign on the dotted line to become members. I think a lot of it has to do with kind of the considerations over legal liability with being a council member, and also just if you're going to be responsible for this network, if something bad goes, something bad happens, what's going to be expected from those council members. And as you know, these are large global corporate organizations where being involved with Hedera is obviously one small piece of this much broader activities that they'll be involved with. So they want to make sure that they're not going to be held to, basically that something small is not going to necessarily lead to massive legal implications. So anyway, I think that those considerations over the legal liabilities of joining the council are part of the reasons that it's probably taking some time for the council members to sign on board. Also, a lot of folks have been asking about the actual member agreement. Hedera hasn't necessarily mentioned any of the specific details of the agreement or when they plan to publish any of those details. I would just say, listen, Hedera's got to go basically recruit the remaining members. I'm sure in due course they'll share some of the information coming out of that member agreement and talk more about the governance council in depth, talking about the different committees, how things are going to be structured. I just think right now there's kind of bigger things to focus their attention on. And also too, they have plenty of time to share this information before open access. So I think just folks in the community should just hang tight before we find out more about this. All right, so I'm gonna just take a quick pause here. This brings us into our next segment, and I know I've used up a good chunk of time to go through the council members, but obviously, hey, that's a pretty big announcement this past week. So I'm just gonna take a good look into the comments, see if anyone has said anything here. And yeah, let me show you my latest feature here. Since I'm using this OBS software, we can actually take a look at the comments. So nothing much in Discord. Yeah, this looks like Jurgen there is adding some additional commentary about the council members and their size. So great. Okay, so we're gonna move on here next to talk about Helix. So just as a refresher here, so the Helix Accelerator program is the first Hedera Hashgraph focused accelerator that's based in Hong Kong. And it's been set up not by Hedera Hashgraph, but a organization called the Mind Fund, or to be specific, a venture capital firm called the Mind Fund that's based in Asia. And basically, what's unique about Helix is that, like I said, it's not Hedera's doing. It's actually someone that's involved in the community, more specifically an investor in the space that's basically set up their own accelerator to spark the development of these different companies being built on top of Hedera Hashgraph. So if you haven't done so already, you should check out Helix's website. But the reason why I wanted to talk about it was that this actually 2 weeks ago, or I'm sorry, Monday the 18th was the kind of unofficial or soft launch of Helix, where all of the cohort of companies that were joining Helix had to report to Hong Kong to basically kick off their boot camp portion of the accelerator. So basically from February 18th to, oh, I'm sorry, I got my dates wrong. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong dates on the calendars. February 11th through February 22nd, the first cohort of Helix reported to Hong Kong to kick things off with their boot camp. And yeah, like I said, the teams have been part of a boot camp that was geared towards just one, further introducing them to Hedera Hashgraph, talking about some basic, business concepts around marketing, branding, how do you set up your company, legal, regulatory considerations, handling of intellectual property, how to go about fundraising, pitching, how do you go about valuations. So the typical things that you would expect in other like accelerators, the teams were involved with that. But like I said before, everything wrapped up this past week on February the 22nd with the first cohort successfully completing their boot camp and just going to the Helix like Twitter here. Looks like they had a kind of like celebration, wrapping things up. And what I also will plan on doing is, clearly Helix is something that's really exciting development in the community, and I know a lot of folks have expressed interest in learning more about it. So I'm actually in the process of actually going to be doing like a standalone video to basically take a look at Helix, and more specifically the companies that are participating in it. So be on the lookout for that. But just real quickly, as far as like the companies that are part of Helix, as far as I understand, there's actually 12 companies that joined. Originally, I understand Helix was going out to try to fill the program with only 10 companies, but they ended up getting 12 just based on the overall interest from folks in the in the space. A lot of folks, a lot of the companies that joined the program were actually companies that were part of Hedera 18 through the Global Hackathon. But then also it sounded like, as other companies, were interested in building on top of Hedera Hashgraph, they also joined, the program. So, and like I said, just looking at some of these, the backgrounds and also the proposed use cases that these companies are looking to build on top of Hedera Hashgraph, it's pretty interesting, and it's great to see that they're getting the support through like an accelerator like Helix. So like I said, I'm hoping to do more coverage of this, hopefully getting a standalone video, so be on the lookout for this. But in the meantime, if you want to learn more about it, be sure to check out the Helix website right here, and then also obviously follow them on Twitter. And at the same time too, I don't know if anyone's aware, but Andrew Antar from Hero.fm actually has joined us on the Gossip Group's Discord server, and him and I have been chatting. Basically he's offering up a AMA if anyone's interested in learning more about Helix. So like I said, feel free to join us in the Gossip Group's Discord server, where we can have some further discussions and learn more about what's going on in the Helix accelerator. So let me just get back here. Okay, cool. All right, so now to kind of just wrap things up with Helix, so we'll move on to kind of the next section here, which is basically talking about the mainnet, the testing program, and just some general updates as it relates to some of the development activities that have been taking place on Hedera over the course of January and also into February. So let me just move on here. All right. So, as many folks are aware, Hedera announced their community testing program back in January, which basically enabled various folks in the in the community to actually take part in testing several aspects of the the Hedera Hashgraph like mainnet, and also those folks that signed up also were provided early access and were able to set up their accounts on top of the mainnet. So as from what we heard at the end of January, it looks to be that 5,000 accounts were created as part of this early access program, and then of those 5,000 accounts, a lot of those individuals had taken place in the community testing program, which was obviously great. Heard that there was a lot of activities. I know people were posting their wallets and also sharing their information on Twitter, and there was a whole host of like traffic as a result of that. So it's really exciting to see people take part in that. Same time too, I know there was a lot of kind of aches and pains felt by folks in the community with getting set up with the testing program, installing the daily timestamp web browser. I know myself, it took me a long time before I was able to officially use the daily timestamp, partially because of how the cookies in my Chrome browser were interacting with the browser plugin. Also, too, there were some noted like latencies between when micropayments were made and when things were showing up in the wallet. So I know that there's clearly some bugs with that kind of first release. So I understand the reason why Hedera is kind of wrapping up this phase 1 testing is that they'll ultimately open up a phase 2, which will incorporate some of the feedback and also have fixed some of those like bugs that were noted during phase 1. But like I said, pretty cool to see that over 5,000 accounts were created, all over the world, and also the various folks that were getting involved with that. Same time too, there's also been a lot of work taking place as far as developers getting accustomed to the the SDKs or the Hedera SDKs that have been published in various programming languages. I know initially when they were released right around Hedera 18, there was a little bit of kind of like I said, bugs or some hiccups there, but it looks that over the past couple months the team has made some updates to those and have like kind of refined some like some of those like issues, and it looks like they're going to be providing some further support over the course of February, this month, and also working to improve a lot of the documentation there. And if you haven't done so already, you can check out Hedera Hashgraph's the GitHub repository, and you can also see there's been a lot of activities on the the Java SDK, and also particularly the Go SDK is. I also know too that was one that was featured in some of the recent videos and that was published by like Hedera Hashgraph. But it's great to see that is folks are getting in there, playing around with the SDKs, also signing up with their accounts on the mainnet, playing around with the testnet. So it's great to see people getting involved with that. And like I said, it looks like phase 2 is going to be starting in the next couple weeks. I would imagine probably some point in early March. So be on the lookout for this. And also, if you want to learn more about the community testing program, which I understand will carry over into phase 2, made a video about that with Brady Gentile from the Hedera Hashgraph team. So so if you didn't get a chance to open up your account or earn H-bars as part of the testing program, hold tight. It looks like things are going to be starting soon on that. Okay. All right. So now we're going to move on to kind of our fourth section of this live stream update, and this is mainly around some of the recent management updates from Hedera Hashgraph. And specifically, I wanted to call out a notable update was that Lionel hold on a second. If people don't realize I struggle always pronouncing people's names, so let me just make sure. Yeah, so sorry, I'm having an issue on my end. Yeah, so Lionel is going to be joining Hedera Hashgraph as their chief product officer, and this is pretty noteworthy considering he has, basically previously he comes from Oracle and was responsible for kind of their emerging technology group, and also have had extensive experience kind of building out the whole Internet of Things business and basically commercializing that as part of Cisco. And I think what's kind of noteworthy about Lionel joining Hedera Hashgraph is that, part of his role, and this is what I've kind of heard from some folks in the community, is that part of his role at Oracle was, obviously taking the products and solutions from Oracle and also bridging it to, various folks in the industry, working with system integrators and working with technology partners or consulting partners to ultimately, provide tailored solutions to, enterprises in the space, and also collecting that feedback and then translating it into, the product. And from what I also understand is that Lionel's comes with just an extensive background, industry ties, and connections in that space. So I think it's pretty good to see that he will be joining Hedera Hashgraph, as hopefully we'll be able to leverage some of those relationships as part of his role at Hedera Hashgraph in helping to introduce more enterprises to distributed ledgers, specifically Hedera, and also encouraging them to build on top of it. So, like I said, it's pretty exciting to see the announcement that he'll be joining. Also, it looks like he came over with a couple other former colleagues that will be joining him, as part of the product team. And yeah, I know some folks in the community probably ask, like, hey, didn't Hedera Hashgraph already have a chief product officer, Patrick Harding, that was featured at Hedera 18? Well, I guess my understanding is that essentially Patrick Harding and Hedera just kind of parted ways there, and he just moved on to other things. So it's really great to see that Hedera had a replacement on the chief product officer, and it looks like they're also coming in with some very extensive backgrounds and experience, and also more so, the connections within the kind of enterprise, like kind of software development space that will hopefully help with kind of overall like market penetration. So on top of the chief product officer announcement, also there were some updates back in January from Hedera Hashgraph, specifically in Asia Pac, or the Asia Pacific region. So as many folks are aware, Edgar CA is the head of the Asia Pacific region, and also he's been supported by various folks throughout Asia, and recently it looks that Hedera has also made an official announcement with Sami Mian will be basically the head of Hedera's Japan and also Korean operations. Previously, Sami was in charge of just Hedera in Japan, but it looks as Hedera is making a kind of bigger presence in Japan and Korea, that they decided to have someone responsible for both of those regions. And basically, if you're not familiar with who Sami is, well, he was essentially the guy that was hosting the Hedera assembly this past week, and also he has a lot of charisma, but at the same time too comes from a very extensive background in the financial services world, and yeah, I think it's from what I've heard, he's been very key in kind of with Hedera's introductions to various entities there in Japan and also in Korea. So it's great to see that Hedera has got that strong representation in the Asian Pacific region, specifically Japan and Korea, as those are some really good key markets and also great places for Hedera to continue their kind of expansion. So I guess those were kind of like the main updates from the management side. I guess the next and kind of final segment here I wanted to just take some time to update you on is also some cool projects that I've seen within the community. And partially the reason why I'm excited about these two projects is that they kind of focus around Hashgraph analytics, or essentially like block explorers for Hedera Hashgraph public network. And they basically, these two sites are hash-hash.info and hbarscan. And we'll actually take a look at those. And if you haven't done so, I highly recommend you check out these websites. But just figure we take some time to take a look at the two. So basically, the first one we have up here is hash-hash.info. And more or less, this is basically a basic version of like a block explorer, but it's geared towards Hedera Hashgraph. And what I think is really cool is that they've already done a pretty good job at mapping out all the individual accounts there on the mainnet, and then also have a section here that calls out some interesting accounts, specifically tagging which accounts or some of the identities associated with some of the those accounts. So basically, the daily timestamp account, also the Hedera Treasury account, etc. But this is obviously clearly in its basic form, partially because open access is not rolled out yet. So there's a lot of features that are going to be limited to anyone that's looking to build on top of the platform. Also, folks that are looking to build some of these analytics tools or tools that pull together historical transactions. They're going to need to ultimately use like those mirror nodes that we heard about during Hedera 18, which those are not necessarily available yet. So, like I said, it's in the early stages of development, but I think it's kind of cool to check out, and you can look at some of the basic stats on the network. So that's hash-hash.info. If you want to learn more about the development of it, it was also featured as part of the hashgraph.org kind of community section that kind of called out, that did it kind of like a feature of the creator of the site, Nick. And yeah, you can learn more about it through hashgraph.org. But at the same time, too, another site I wanted to kind of call out, and this is partially because a good friend of mine, Rafi, also created a site. It's called hbarscan. And essentially, this is looking to do the same things that hash-hash.info is looking to do, whereas like hbarscan is looking to basically create like an event explorer, ultimately looking at all the historical events and transactions that have taken place on the Hedera Hashgraph network. But currently, right now, just because there's limited access to certain capabilities of pulling data. hbarscan is just looking at only testnet data, and it's currently being worked on behind the scenes. But this will definitely be a interesting site to check out, as you'll be able to pull more, pull together information coming from the Hedera network. And like I said, also too, good friend Rafi put this together. We've also talked about doing some cross promotional work together. So I think you should definitely keep a close eye on hbarscan along with hash-hash.info, because that definitely they're in the early stages of development, but clearly they have a lot of potential in the months and years ahead. So that kind of brings me to the end of kind of what I wanted to cover today. I guess at this point, I want to just open it up for any comments or questions there. Just taking a look at YouTube. Looks like they just got a lot of comments from folks about the different companies they're making up the council. Looks like we don't have much in Discord. So yeah, like I said, I just wanted to put together this this like live stream to just cover some of these updates. It's much easier for me to just turn things on and do a live stream as opposed to doing one of those produced videos. So I want to try to get into the habit of doing this more frequently. Be sure to let me know what you think. After this video is complete, leaving me some comments on either Gossip Group's Discord server, or just reaching out to me on either Twitter, Telegram, etc. Yeah, so a lot of great updates, and we definitely will keep a close eye on what's developing in the months ahead, and also, like I said, going to be hopefully putting together some content as it relates to Helix. So with all this being said, thank you all for watching. Greatly appreciate the support, especially those that have stuck on through the end of the stream. Also, if you haven't done so already, be sure to kind of smash that like button, as that always helps with the stream getting picked up and noticed by the YouTube algorithm, and also subscribe if you haven't done so already. So thank you all for joining, and look forward to the next update. And yeah, until next time, this is the Gossip Guy signing out. Thanks for watching.